We're the Blackthorn Brothers who've just finished making our new video game. It's a blend between deck builders like Slay the Spire and spatial optimization games like Patchworks or Backpack Battles. You're a student of magic crafting a deck of spells on your pilgrimage through the sprawling city of Ecastel, encountering plague doctors, witches, bloodlords, and so much more. Each spell takes up space on your board, making for interesting turn-by-turn decisions on what plays to prioritize and how to squeeze the most powerful synergies through your limited space. There's close to 100 spells and they can all combine in unique ways. Going into this project, my brother and I wanted to make players feel creative and occasionally very powerful as you do in Slay the Spire and Balatro. So almost all our design decisions revolved around reinforcing those feelings, and hopefully you'll experience that through the big decisions like choosing spells that cleverly synergize and micro decisions when squeezing spells together turn by turn. The game is on Steam for $5 and the link is in the description. Now let's go back in time and share how this game was made, from the idea to the finished project. First of all, there was prototyping. So on the hunt for our next big game idea, we began making this little adventure game where you explore tiny planets and stab anything that moves. I was really enjoying working on the visual style and feel, and over the course of a month, the game evolved to include all kinds of creatures and habitats. But we struggled making engaging gameplay, and were beginning to turn around in circles. Later, the player changed to this snake-like cat, and the world grew more somber, with crows, mad cultists, and toothy beasts. We made centipede-like creatures, then grew tired of moving a player around, so it removed our poor protagonist and went on a side quest, creating a sort of mini horror base building game. You grab minions, catapult them at monsters, and build houses to spawn more, as well as lights to clear away some of the clawing darkness. When this prototype fails to keep us excited, we switched gears to a survival experiment, where you had an inventory and stats like hunger, but we quickly returned to something more minimalist. Now the cat, who makes his big return, could throw minions at monsters to distract them. We went on more side quests, creating bloodhounds that frantically struggle against their chains, desperate to devour you, and then animated famished creatures hidden in planets, their friendly face acting as a facade. We were increasingly excited about this universe we were building up. The autumn colors, the small, chirping birds, and occasionally a mimicry planet. It was to be a grand adventure about a cat leaving its home to reach the moon. It was going to include a bunch of secrets, an open world structure, and lots of interesting items that could be picked up and thrown around. Looking back, I think it was mostly a lack of patience that threw us off course and had us seeking alternative ideas. The visuals felt fresh, many of the mechanics were interesting, but because it had now been well over 2 months, we were starting to feel a familiar itch to start over and head towards greener pastures. Leaving behind the vibrant world of Mooncat, we spent 6 weeks making what in hindsight appears to be a far less interesting prototype. You control various characters with different movesets, chaining up combos. For every golden orb you collect with one elegant move, the more points you gain. Then we spent a couple days making Tiny Experiments, a game about devouring bats. A haunting experience about being a shepherd lost in a cold Siberian world. A game about infinitely scrolling until your character grows old and wrinkled. We're quickly reminded that themes and ideas are easy to come by and that the execution is the most challenging part. Of course, not all themes and fantasies are born equal, so some of these prototypes probably lacked a great deal of the fantasy element so essential in the appeal triad Jonas Tyroller describes beautifully in his video on prototyping. For example, a lot more people dream about being a stealthy ninja as opposed to a slimy fish in a tank or a bat-eating mutant. We also probably wasted quite a bit of time by not consistently prototyping the visuals and feel of a game separate from the gameplay aspects. This perhaps also explains why we struggled with clear, juicy gameplay in Mooncat, since whenever we felt like experimenting with a new gameplay direction, I'd be concerned about how that would affect the art, animations, and sprites I'd already made. Part of this strong habit to quickly merge gameplay and art comes from the many game jams we took part back in the day, where since time is such a limited resource, spending too much of it on experimentation and exploring various playstyles and visuals runs the great risk of not completing anything on time. Thankfully, this also means we're used to building up worlds very quickly, so an idea can strike and within days it can be playable in Unity. For those who don't know, Liam is usually the lead programmer on these projects while I make the visuals, but we're both equally involved in the design, and pretty much dabble in every other part of the development process, meaning we wear multiple hats every single day. This fascinating use of a bunch of different skills that connect in unique ways is partly why I'm in love with the craft of game development. Sometimes, though, it's a real pain in the butt. For example, when we've given up on the 100th experiment and we're back on the whiteboard trying to think of what to make next. Again, I believe it's a mistake throwing away our prototypes and not attempting to instead merge them or branch off into variants. This means we're starting over from square one instead of improving on some of the good ideas we already had. But there you have it, one late winter morning, we were throwing ideas around yet again, when suddenly I had a luxury aha moment. What if we merged Slay the Spire and Tetris? I began to excitedly share my thoughts with Liam, imagining cards that instead of simply costing mana, would take up space on a grid-like board. Powerful cards would act as long, awkward pieces. Small spells would hardly take up any space. We would then make a bunch of combos. Pieces on the board could perhaps combine or give agency bonuses to future pieces. You can expand your board, destroy pieces to free up space, and all of this are wrapped in Slay the Spire's crystal clear design, where you quickly cycle through your deck of cards and can see enemy intents. But in our game, enemies wouldn't only deal you damage, but also clog up your board and add explosive mines that would deal you damage if you placed a card over it. All of a sudden, a rush of fresh ideas came pouring in, and a quick paper prototype later, we were convinced this was worth coding out in Unity. Liam quickly got the core gameplay working, with drawing and discarding cards, placing them on a board and enemy intent. I began making some of the visuals. For once, we were prototyping gameplay and aesthetics separately, although we did very quickly merge the two. Soon we had a bunch of creatures you could battle against. We wanted the player to feel like a wizard, student of magic. Adding cards to your deck should be like adding knowledge to your spellbook, hence why I made the cards look like pages from an old arcane tome, and why the first player character holds a giant book. You can gain power, which has you deal extra damage, apply vulnerable to enemies, which raises that damage by 50%, weaken them, gain block to protect your precious HP, and even perfect fit, which is a powerful effect applied only if the card fills up every last remaining tile on your board. Soon we found that we had to carefully brainstorm on not only what cards to add, but also make interesting turn-by-turn decisions on what cards to play, where in the board, and in which order. A first round of playtesting garnered some positive feedback, which only boosted our motivation further. After months of uncertain prototyping, it was a relief and joy to have a solid project that seems to pretty much design itself. Ideas flowed naturally, and motivation came easy. I wasn't very happy with the first visual pass, so I cooked up a more detailed Gothic city. A lot of the game art I make recently is inspired and improved by the consistent life drawing practice I keep up on paper. Portrait sketches, city drawings, street corners, live models, all of this helps improve my game art. Whereas a few years back, I was more or less stuck with ultra cartoony styles for every single game. Now I have more room to expand how the game looks and feels. With that said, I still went for rather stylish, big-headed creatures and weird perspective. Old habits. I enjoyed the mixture of cartoony and gritty, and the overall ambience of distant Gothic spires, cobbled streets, and gently falling snow. We spent a lot of time on feedback and clear pop-up explanations. Every time you hover over a card, we give helpful keyword explanations. Same for enemies, same for everything else we later added. Branching paths will keep you on your toes. Simple decisions in campfire rooms like whether to heal up or expand your board are rarely straightforward, and it's always interesting learning new spells from the Warlock. There's 24 unique enemies that combine to make for tons of challenging encounters. Some of these, such as the Cursed Scholar, should really keep you on your toes and force you to change up your playstyle. You'll find mutant rats that poison you, animated towers and tentacled nightmares that fill your deck with useless sticky cards, not to mention the fabled Lightning Struck King that you can find deep in the heart of the city we ended up calling a castle. Ellen Sr. made the haunting soundtrack you can hear in the background. It has a beautiful feel to it, and although she initially made it for Mooncat, I think it fits perfectly with this game, which we finally settled on calling the Lightning Struck Orphan. There's lore about all this game, juicy lore which you can discover while playing, and Ellen also made a far more frantic, gritty soundtrack for boss fights. We had plenty of ideas which we shelved or felt oddly lazy to try and implement because we were so caught up in the idea of making progress towards the finish line. This meant that horizontal progress and exploration was often neglected in our race to add more bosses and cards. The whole project was made basically in a whirlwind, a short and passionate development cycle that lasted about 4 months. We think that out of the hundreds of small games we've created so far, this is easily our best. It's home-cooked and certainly imperfect, but should offer many an interesting adventure, synergy, and powerful aha moments as you unleash devastating chaos on the creatures that stand in your way. And yeah, with that said, we just can't wait for your feedback on the Lightning Struck Orphan. Tell us what you think about the gameplay, the artwork, the music, the feel, and what you would improve. That's the sort of conversation that will help us make even better games going forward. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to see more game dev videos, game dev collaborations, behind the scenes of how we make our games. And yeah, see you real soon, guys. Cheers.